Okay, it's not even, like we wouldn't call it a mountain. Against this backdrop, it doesn't even count as a hill. We call it the Sermon on the Mount. When Jesus delivered the Sermon on the Mount, I'm guessing it was a 3-hour sermon. But if you memorize it and like recite it, it's 17 minutes. And yet, no speech in human history comes close to the impact of this one message. And I'm going to talk around it and then get to the main point of the Sermon on the Mount. There were 5 moments in the Sermon on the Mount. Let me just run through the 5. The first one might surprise you. It's actually after the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, etc. The last Beatitude is blessed are the persecuted. And Jesus made a comment about that one and only that one Beatitude. And he said, blessed are you when people persecute you for me. No other Jew would ever have said you're blessed by being persecuted for me. Because the reason you're blessed is because you were persecuted for God or God's law. And if you, yeah, come on through. There's one and only one Beatitude that Jesus makes a comment on. Blessed are the persecuted. In Jewish literature, some people said you're blessed by being beaten or persecuted, but they always said you're blessed by being persecuted for God's law, for being faithful to God. No one would ever say you're blessed by being persecuted for me. In other words, where the name Yahweh belonged in the sentence, Jesus put himself. It was absolutely unprecedented. If you fast forward to the very end of the Sermon on the Mount, remember that children's song, The Wise Man Built His House Upon the Rock? He says the same thing, that my words are Torah. What I say is like the law of God that comes out of Mount Sinai. And here's what's really interesting. If you backtrack to Matthew chapter 3 and 4, right before you get to the sermon, you know what you have? Jesus' baptism and Jesus' temptation in the wilderness, both of which imitated what Moses did by going through the Red Sea and by leading people through the wilderness. So Matthew, in a very subtle way, you kind of got to put a yarmulke on to catch it, but in a subtle way, Matthew is saying, Jesus is the new Moses. And that was prophesied, Deuteronomy 18, verses 15 through 18. There would be one who come after me that's like me. So Jesus is fulfilling that, and guess what he did? He goes up on a mountain, just like Moses went up on a mountain. He sat down, and then he gives this new law. And here's what's different between Sinai and the Sermon on the Mount. The God that we worship is eyeball to eyeball. He's no longer distant on a mountain. He's no longer so far away and unthinkable and unprecedented. He is localized so that we can see, feel, touch, and know him. That's what an extraordinary difference. Okay, that's number one. Number two, verse 20, Matthew 5:20. Jesus says, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, the teachers of the law, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. How are you going to be more righteous than a Pharisee? They tithed even their garden herbs. They prayed 3 times a day. They fasted once a week. How many of you do that? The secret is, Jesus is not asking for a broader righteousness, to do more and more and more, but a deeper righteousness. And for the first time ever in religion, religion is about a person, not a philosophy. And to be deeper in righteousness means, I'm going to measure you by your heart, not by your behavior. No other religion can do that. Third massive moment comes at the tail end of chapter 5. I believe it's verse 45. Jesus says, you've heard that it was said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I'm telling you to love your enemy. And you know, love in Jesus' vernacular is not how you feel about a person. It's how you treat them. And he was in the Middle East. It hasn't changed much over 2,000 years. So to love your enemy might mean to harbor a fugitive. It might mean to give housing and shelter or food to someone that may later attack your family. It's not a sane statement. And don't try to explain it away. But when we begin to love our enemies, that has had more transformative effect on this earth than any single religious statement, and no other religion teaches it. The third one, or the fourth one, is in the Lord's Prayer when Jesus said, "Our Father." Nobody ever prayed like that. Nobody ever talked like that. And yet, every single time Jesus introduces a prayer, he begins with the same statement, Father. And so now we begin to pray with that kind of intimacy, that kind of hopefulness of connection. Last time Jesus totally changed all of religion. You can't go back from this statement. There was a silver rule that said, don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. Matthew 7, verse 12 flips it around with one subtle difference. Instead of don't do, do. Do to others what you would want others to do to you. So instead of being passive, I don't hurt anybody, I don't offend anybody, now we have to be active. Like right now, you're totally fulfilling the silver rule. You're doing jack about the golden rule. And that's made all the difference. So pull all that together. So we got 5 times in one message, Jesus changed all of religion. Here's the point. If you take Jesus seriously, you don't have Jesus in your life. You have your life in Jesus. So the question we have to wrestle with the Sermon on the Mount, is Jesus something to you, or is he everything to you? Because if he's something to you, he's nothing in the end. That's the 5th mountain.